As a driven dentist, you see the world differently. Where some see scarcity, you see abundance. When others want to give up, you keep going. You're building an amazing life of significance. That means you can't rely on ordinary advice from ordinary advisors to get to your goals. You want advice that's going to help maximize your net worth so you can take even better care of the people you love, the causes you care about, and make your dent in the universe. But the fact is, this advice remains hidden because relatively few professionals are well versed in them, and the extremely affluent don't care to let you know about them. Join us as we pull back the curtain to reveal the often hidden advice and strategies used by today's most successful individuals and families. Welcome to Dental Wealth Nation. Here's your host, Tim McNeely.
Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you today. And the reason I'm so excited to be here with you today is we're talking about something pretty big. We're talking about how to exit your dental practice profitably. Some people exit and they don't do so profitably. We want you to exit your dental practice profitably. And by the time we finish today, you're going to know how to do that. You're going to know how to exit your practice profitably. You're going to have some tools and resources to help you do just that. But what I'm most excited about is you're really going to feel a sense of peace in moving forward and putting a plan together. And when it comes to exiting your practice, very few people do it as well as Darren Holstein of Integrity Practice Sales. And I could tell you that Darren has over 21 years of experience as the top performer in the dental industry. I could tell you that he's a co-founder of Integrity Practice Sales. And for the past 12 years, he has personally helped over 150 dentists exit their practice. That's quite a few dentists. But what I really want to tell you is that Darren has a passion for helping dentists just like you. Darren, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be here.
Oh, man, I am so excited. I don't know of a topic that's more important today because there's just so much uncertainty socially, politically, economically. Like there's a lot going on in the world today. And so how do we even start thinking about like preparing for the profitable sale of your practice? I mean, like there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, there is a lot of financial instability out there today. And so I think we're all a little bit nervous about that. But I think with a plan in place, we can all, allay those fears and be prepared for the future. I think the first thing that we need to realize is that there's no time like the present to have a plan. You and I were talking about this earlier, and you mentioned the best plan or the best time to develop a plan was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. And so starting now, I think, is key.
Yeah. And so, right. We talk about putting plans together, and that can be such a nebulous thing because, I know a lot of doctors I talk to, they go, yeah, my plan's to sell in the future. What more of a plan do I need than that? And so what do you mean when you talk about having a plan in place?
Well, first of all, I think we need to figure out who we need to talk to, right? Who can help us, and a good financial advisor such as yourself is actually the first step. This is when I get on the phone with a dentist for the first time, first thing I ask him is, have you talked with your financial advisor if you have one? And if you haven't, consider getting one or talking to your financial advisor first, then talk to your accountant after that. Talk to your spouse or significant other. You may or may not want to talk to a partner, depending on the relationship there. And then also a conversation with the broker. I think those are the first steps, is talk to round up your advisors and talk to your advisors in that order. And then look at, and if you talk to me or any of our people, we're going to tell you that you should have a plan in place in terms of keeping your tenant improvements in your space up to date, whether you own it or not. Keeping your equipment and technology up to date, and when not to buy new equipment and technology, because at some point it becomes the law of diminishing returns. So you want to be strategic about that. Be careful when you invest in those. So, and then the third thing in terms of a plan is, avoid waiting till the last minute once you've burned out and the practice value's, fallen. And so I think when you talk to those advisors, you're going to pretty quickly put a plan together.
Okay. And right, so certainly, right, talk to your spouse, talk to your other advisors, CPA, wealth manager. And you mentioned something interesting in there, and that was right, this idea of even, what are you doing in your office, right, in terms of the tenant improvements or buying equipment. Why does that factor into this?
Well, what was that old movie with if you build it, you'll come, they'll come. I forget the name of the movie, but famous actor.
Field of Dreams, I think.
Field of Dreams. That's right. Yeah. Um, if we have the right facility, we have the right tools and technology, we'll attract good patients. That helps. That's not everything, but it helps to attract good patients and loyalty to the practice. And it also helps to attract a good buyer and keeps the value up. But there's also the timing issue on that. If you wait too long, or if you do that towards the end, you may not recoup that investment. And so, we can help you, and actually your accountant can help you figure out whether or not that kind of investment is going to be worth it at any given timeline.
Okay. So, right, I mean, when should doctors actually start thinking about exiting their practice?
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah, 20 years ago. And if that didn't happen, then, well, something that I like to try to live by is begin with the end in mind. And hardly anybody does that, right? Nobody starts with an exit plan, or very few people do. But if you haven't started with an exit plan in mind, then start with doing that right now, developing an exit plan, because it's never too early to prepare for that.
Yeah. And I agree with that sentiment so much, right? I tell new grads all the time, I'm like, you should be planning for your exit now, because, right, you've worked with a lot of doctors. I had 150 dentists, and as you've gotten to know them, what kind of percentage of their overall net worth does the practice usually make up? Is it a small part or a large part of their net worth?
Well, it depends on how well they've done financially in the practice and outside the practice as well with their investments, and frankly how well they've prepared. But I see it anywhere from 80% all the way up to, or down to 5-10%, depending on how well they've done it. In any case, it's a significant portion of their portfolio usually.
Yeah, right. And it's something that should be planned for and looked at.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what gets in the way of dentists putting a plan together, right? Why aren't they doing this?
Well, I think this is a struggle we all have, right? We have 100 different priorities that we're juggling at any given time, and we tend to dwell on the things that are presently pressing, and so we put off those things that aren't pressing but are important. But given the typical size of this asset, it definitely bears attention and high priority today.
Okay. And right, as we start thinking through, right, putting that plan together, preparing for the profitable sale of your practice, right? We want to start early, right? You can never start too soon. But what do you start doing, right? If you're that new grad, or you've been in business 10 years or 15 years, and you're like, hey, actually what Darren's saying makes a lot of sense, right? I'm not ready to exit for 10, 15 years, but I want to start getting ready. I want to start putting that plan together. Where do you even start, like, pulling the puzzle pieces together?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So I'd start with talking with a financial planner first, like yourself. And then also talk, whether you're a new grad or whether you've been out for 10 or 15 years and you've been operating your own practice for that long. Talk also with a dental practice management consultant. And someone who has experience, preferably somebody who's been in your shoes, who's been a dentist, and oftentimes they can offer the most, the best insights on preparing the practice for an eventual sale. And I think those are the two key players that you want to have involved in the process from start to finish. And so I'd start there for sure.
Gotcha. Now I'm going to pick on financial advisors, and I wear a different hat. This is what I do when I'm not running the show. But as financial advisors, do we actually know what a dental practice is worth?
Um, I would say that not all do.
Hmm.
I know that you do.
Well, I know enough to say, hey, we got to get a valuation of this thing. I'm not the technician. Let's bring in the
Sure.
experts.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes and we all experience this when you get the armchair warriors weighing in on subjects where they shouldn't be weighing in. But we do see that from time to time. But yeah, typically financial advisors and accountants don't really understand practice valuation.
Yeah, and actually, a little personal anecdote. When I first got started in the business years ago, the insurance people would come in and they go, "Oh yeah, we provide business valuation services." And I thought, "Oh, this is great. I don't need to build an outside network. I got all the right people right here." And I ran a couple of those valuations, and then I ran them with real brokers who really knew what they were doing, and the numbers couldn't be further apart. And so I would argue most right wealth managers, financial advisors, CPAs, right, if you're not really in the business of valuing businesses day in and day out, you kind of don't have a clue what they're worth.
Right. Yeah.
So
Even one of the challenges we've had is people that are professional business appraisers. Sometimes, occasionally, a lender will want to get somebody like that involved, and they're from out of state. Oftentimes, they don't know. They just don't understand the local business climate and the dental world locally. And so, yeah, a local broker is, and I would stress too, a broker or broker agent that is local is really important too, because there are microeconomic considerations that come into play, and the local guy or gal is gonna understand those, and that's one of the reasons why we like having boots on the ground all across the state of California.
hmm. Talk to me a little bit about those kind of little micro economies. What's going on there? Do practice values really differ a lot based on location?
Oh yeah, significantly. If you when you get to the coast, especially in the more affluent communities, the same practice with the same numbers, identical characteristics and numbers will sell for 10 to 20% more on the coast in an affluent community than it would in an inland community.
Hmm.
So yeah, they differ quite significantly. And even on some of the coastal communities are not as nice as others, and there's a significant
Hmm.
difference between practice values in those communities.
Right, and that's not something that the local business or the non-local business broker is really going to pick up on, is it?
Right. No, absolutely not.
All right, so you want to start getting your team involved. You want to have that right valuation. You want to start doing some planning, but we're also talking about how to exit your practice profitably. And so what are some factors that go into that profitable exit as opposed to a non-profitable exit?
Well, some of those things that we were talking about briefly before, investing appropriately in the right technology and equipment, and having it up to date, but also not being, spending towards the end of the game, because the law of diminishing returns there, and also the appearance of the place. Those are important factors. Also, the practice numbers. If your overhead's out of control, that's gonna hurt you. Oftentimes in the industry, we hear people refer to a practice value as a percentage of the gross income, the collections, and we call that the rule of thumb, and that's actually a very poor. It's a quick and down and dirty reference, and it's an easy way to make a reference to a practice value. And we hear lenders use that all the time, which is
So what? That's like saying if my practice is doing $1 million, it's worth 70% of that or something like that. What are you talking about exactly?
yeah. So, but that's actually a very poor method of valuation, because the bottom line is ultimately the bottom line, right? That's what matters. And so we do use that rule of thumb in our valuation, but we average it. We do a weighted average over the last few years, with a multiple of the net income, being averaged in there as well. And ultimately, that is the true value of the practice, right? It's a multiple of the net income. And normally for a mom and pop practice, which is a single owner who's working in the practice, who's quarterbacking, managing, owning the practice, it's going to be around 2x. And the doctor's income, salary plus the profit of the practice after that that's all part of the net income, or what we call the seller's discretionary earnings, and it's about 2x that. And if we go by the norms for the area, 70, 80, 90%, if it's in Santa Barbara, for example, or some other like La Jolla down in San Diego, or Newport Beach, it might be 90%. That might be a good rule of thumb, but we'll average that. And they oftentimes come in pretty close to each other. But if the practice is mismanaged, that net income may be really low. And so if you do 2x the net income, then it's going to come in a lot lower. So it's going to drag that average down.
Okay. So all those Costco runs that I've been putting through my practice actually may come back to bite me. Is that what I hear you saying?
Well, they could. We part of the valuation that we do as part of that service, we flesh out all of those kinds of pseudo expenses, and so seller's discretionary earnings is after we've fleshed out all of the what we call add backs, so all the pseudo expenses.
Okay.
But the thing to keep in mind is, while we do a really good job of documenting all of that, the lenders may not allow all of that when they look at it through their lens and put their valuation model on it. They may come up with a lower number because of all the hidden expenses in there.
Okay.
And it can be a bit of a I hate to use a negative word like this, but it can be a bit of a fight with them, to trying to get them to recognize these add backs.
Okay. And so, right. So you certainly want to start looking at those expenses, right? That's how you can actually drive the valuation of your practice higher, is paying attention to what the net income is then, isn't it?
Absolutely. Bottom line.
So how many years of returns, right? So if I've been running a terrible practice and putting a whole bunch of expenses through, and then 12 months before I'm ready to sell, I really clean the books up. Is that going to help me a whole lot?
No. I mean, everybody, I would not say, generally the bulk of the add backs are recognized by buyers and lenders. And then, if it's really out of control, there's just been a lot of, like an airplane and a boat being run through the business. Those are kind of obvious and standouts. And I've seen those. But those are kind of easy add backs. It's the ones that are hidden, like it's multiple expenses that are going under supplies, for example, like you said, the Costco runs, that sort of thing. Those are a little more difficult. And if we really need those for the valuation, we'll literally pull out the general ledger and show it to the lender if we have to, and the buyer. So I'm not so much worried about that kind of thing as I am about just out of control overhead. And the biggest problem and challenge I see in most practices is staff. And that's the biggest overhead, right? That to begin with. And if that's out of control, it's out of control in a big way often, or it has a large impact on the bottom line. That's the single largest one. The other one is another one is rent. Lab is probably the next. Lab is oftentimes the second largest, and then rent. But sometimes in some places, and especially in LA, I see where the rent is really out of control. And there's only two things you can do to control your rent as a percentage, expense of your overall business, your overall revenue, and that is either negotiate a better lease or relocate, which is very expensive, so it's not ideal, or drive your top line up, and so your rent shouldn't be more than 5% of your gross.
Okay. Hey, this is Tim McNeely. You're listening to the Dental Wealth Nation show. I've been talking with Darren Holstein of Integrity Practice Sales, and we've been talking about how to prepare your practice for a profitable exit. And if you hang around to the end, you're going to hear about how you can actually get a good valuation of your practice so that you can make some better choices. So hang on to the end. You'll want to know how you can take advantage of this. And so Darren, right, coming back to this theme of right, really preparing for the profitable exit of your practice, right? We've got things like the finances, making sure those are cleaned up, making sure that the office looks good and the equipment's up to date, making sure we've brought our team around. We've talked about, some of the things that get in the way of actually moving forward. What are some mistakes that you've seen made by doctors who have tried to exit their practice?
Well, I mean, the big one is what we've been talking about, is not having a plan. And, when you don't, how's the old saying going? I'm sure my former financial advisor used to say this, a failure to plan is a plan to fail.
Yeah. But what are the things that happen if you don't have a plan? Do I just get less from my practice? Does the practice sale not happen? Like what are some real things that can actually happen if you haven't planned well?
Yeah, well, an extreme example is, if you've got a mid-size practice to begin with, if your revenue's around 500 to 600,000 a year, as you get, that's already a challenge. That's outside of the sweet spot. It's a slim market of people that are looking for a practice like that. The dental students are coming out of school and they can't buy until they've been out for a couple of years. Usually the lenders won't touch them, but they've got, $400,000, $500,000 worth of debt already, just in school loans coming out of school. And so they need significant cash flow to support that. And so a practice that's doing $500,000 a year isn't going to give them the cash flow they need, especially if certain overhead items are out of control, like staff and rent. And then what happens oftentimes is the dentists that were doing these sort of, small numbers, I hate to put it that way, but, it's 500,000 a year is not it doesn't provide enough cash flow. And that dentist will probably have to work somewhere else to have enough cash flow to be able to get a loan on the practice. So and then on top of that, if you add to that, the dentist, kind of gets burned out, which is very typical, and starts slowing down, then sometimes we get into the place where it's just not saleable. You can't sell the practice. So then we have to try to look for a local dentist where they can buy and merge it in. And then the value goes down even further because it's a short sale. It's just not as valuable as a practice in place. So that's kind of the extreme. And then, some of the other things that perils that we see are, where the facility's kind of fallen into decay. It hasn't been kept up. There was no plan to, keep things updated incrementally over with those incremental expenses. If you have a plan, then every year you're investing, you have a budget to invest in the practice and keep it up to date. So we see that sometimes where things are kind of falling apart, and that kind of, there's a hit for that too, if they're not up to date with technology and so forth. So, there are all kinds of landmines out there.
Well, you just said something that really I found interesting. It almost sounded like you said there's a limited market for practices doing 500,000-600,000 a year, right? There's more of a limited market for smaller practices. Did I hear that correctly?
You did, yeah. The sweet spot is between now it's between about 700,000-800,000 on the low end to about $1.2 million, $1.3 million. That's where the bulk of the buyer market is. They need that kind of revenue for to satisfy the lenders in terms of cash flow. And so you fall below that, and the market starts to thin out. There are fewer buyers that can do that.
So really that new dental student who's thinking, I really want to buy that practice for 500,000, 400, 600. It's not going to actually support and have the cash flow to help them pay that loan. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right. Yeah. And we do sell those practices, but what the dentist has, most of the dentists just don't want to do that. And so we have to get creative and to satisfy the lender that they're going to have enough cash flow, they'll have to work part-time. And do this. They have to work part-time in another dentist in another dental office in another town, usually, because that dentist doesn't want them competing for patients. And so they're traveling out of town to work there a day or two a week.
That sounds like a terrible exit plan.
No
Wow.
idea.
Okay. So that's fascinating. So really, right, if you're listening to this and your practice is right on that cusp of 600, 650, it really is worth your time and effort to put a little effort into to grow that practice, isn't it?
Absolutely. And there are a myriad number of ways that you can do that. But one of the best ways and fastest ways to do that is to get with a consultant. And you don't want to wait until you're a year or two away from selling. You want to do this years before and keep the momentum going, keep the practice, get it into that sweet spot and keep it either, flat to, incrementally increasing, or, you could have it rapidly increasing, but it's got to be flat to growing at least.
Wow, interesting. So it sounds like, right, once again, getting ready to exit your practice profitably, it starts well before the exit, doesn't it?
Yeah, years.
Yeah.
Really,
Wow.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, right, tell me about a story about a doctor who did come to you and who you've worked with, who you helped put that plan together, and how did their exit look different than some of these other ones?
Sure. Yeah. So he's a great friend of mine. I've known him for a lot of years, and he also is a great friend and former client to my partner, Bill Kimball. Dr. Kimball, he's a consultant, and he worked with Bill for years to grow the practice. And he sold when he was 62, and then he worked back for the buyer because he wanted to help him make sure that he kept the goodwill in the practice. And he grew that practice from, I think when Bill started working with him, he was averaging about 400,000 a year, something like that, and 400 to 500,000. And when he sold the practice the year prior to selling it, he was just a tick under $1.5 million. Bill had helped him exit Delta and all other insurances and helped him develop his own concierge program. And so he was a fee-for-service. He had a fee-for-service practice. He was working three days a week, I think, himself. And the office was open 4, and he was personally working 3. And it was the only drawback was he was in this 3-operatory space, so there was no room to grow. And so that's the consideration too. If you've maxed out your space in terms of growth opportunity, then you have a facility problem. And so one creative thing we had to do for him is we found because we talked about this in advance, and we found a space in town that the timing worked out good because the landlord was trying to get the building filled up. He was having a hard time. And so the timing was good. The landlord actually we negotiated for the landlord to pay all the tenant improvements. And so he got a new office for free. And then a buyer came in that was, interested in that. And he knew that he was going to have to equip the additional 3 operatories because there were 6 ops in the new building. And, we coordinate all this with the dental dealer to give him the plan and provide the equipment and everything. But it worked out really well. It was just it was a beautiful transition. He got a great price for the practice, and we learned a few things along the way there. And one of the things that was driven home to us was that practice was perfect. It was primed and ready, except for the facility. But we got lucky on that one.
Okay. Well, right. There's so many variables that go into selling a practice, aren't there?
Oh yeah. There's a lot, and that's why you need help from advisors.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times, right, I know doctors may be thinking this is just so overwhelming, right? I've got to talk to all these people. I've got to put together the team. What would you tell a doctor who says, man, I know I need to move forward with this. I'm so worried about the time commitment on my part that it's going to take. I don't have the professionals. I don't know who to talk to for the real estate side of things. I don't know who to talk to in terms of advisors. What would you tell someone like that?
Number one, don't be besides the time investment, I think people are often afraid of the expense, right? Because somebody's got to pay all these advisors for their time, and it's the dentist that, of course, who's receiving the benefit of that. And so it costs money. And I would say to the dentist who's concerned about that, don't be concerned about that. Just make sure that you get good advisors that have a good reputation, and because it pays in spades. And you just have to be patient, because it'll pay off in the short term, midterm, and long term. But you've got to be willing to commit.
Yeah. Well, in doing this over 12 years, I'm guessing you've probably developed a couple good connections and resources and advisors that you can help bring in for doctors also.
Absolutely. Yep. And and I would say I've been a little bit reticent to shamelessly plug myself or the other brokers out there, but it's good. It's a good idea, because that won't cost you anything until you sell the practice. And oftentimes a good broker who's got a lot of experience in the industry can help give you some good advice and good guidance up front as to how to prepare. I mean, that's the conversation we're having right now, right? And it won't cost you anything. And so, because we know what sells and what sells for more and what sells for less, and we can give you some good pointers as to how to prepare and which advisors to talk to.
Yeah. Well, and there's nothing wrong with a little shameless plug here and there. And actually, that's kind of where I wanted to go next is, in any industry, right? You've got really top tier quality professionals. You've got some middle of the road, mediocre ones, and then you've got some that you just want to stay away from. And so, right, if you're a doctor, if you're considering, right, just even starting down this road of like trying to figure out what your practice is worth and when do you want to exit, and doing those upgrades or not to do those upgrades, like what are some things to look for in the different brokers that are out there? What are some signs of a good quality broker? And then what are some signs that you want to run away?
Sure. Yeah. Good question. I mean, there are all kinds of little signs. How they present themselves, I think, is first impression still means something. I think that's really important. I think that experience and reputation, I think it makes sense to, just like, when I go see a dentist or a doctor, I do like to get second and third opinions, and I like to ask around too. And some of these online forums are okay for that sort of thing. But I think if you have colleagues in the industry or, friends, or, if ask the broker for some references, and if they're struggling to give you some names and phone numbers, that's a bad sign. You want somebody who can give you a number of solid references of people who've been happy with their services. And so I think those are, for starters, those are some things to look for.
Okay. So really the reputation, ask your colleagues, right? Make sure whoever you're considering working with actually does have that solid reputation.
Yeah. And have them come in, call the broker and ask them to come meet with you in person. You will find that more than half of them will not do that. They just don't, because they're too far away.
I was going to say, that's not too big of an ask. Like, even in today's world, like, that's okay to expect that.
It's still fairly uncommon there. You really want somebody to that will come, and there are a number of us that do that, but that's what you want. You want somebody that's hands-on and who will come in, and the point of hiring somebody to do this work is so that you don't have to do it. You don't have to be stressed out, and because it'll take you your time will be 5 times as much as the broker's time at getting this done. And the point of paying a broker to sell your practice is so you don't have to deal with it. You don't have to go meet and show the practice to the dentist, the buyers out there. Maybe the broker will ask you to be there because the buyer wants to meet you, but at least there are 100 million other things that you don't, and that's hyperbole there, maybe 100 that you won't need to do if you hire the right broker who's willing to be present on the ground.
Interesting. No, I think that's great advice, because there's so many variables, right? So many things that have to be looked at and paid attention to, and that's kind of one of the dangers of trying to do this yourself, isn't it? Is you can end up missing some key things.
Yeah, and it's super stressful. And I remember talking to a dentist one time, and I forget what he was talking about some service doing him. I forget if I think it had to do with, it might've been with regards to CAD/CAM dentistry. He felt like, and I know I used to sell that equipment when I worked for a dental dealer years ago, but he talked about, I'd rather pay a lab guy to do that because my time is much more valuable chairside. And so your time is far more valuable chairside than it is trying to sell your practice.
Yeah. So right, if we do want to, engage and start trying to figure out a value of our practice and putting a plan together, how can you help us? What can Integrity, what can Darren do for us?
So yeah, when we first engage a new client, we'll come in and we do of course, evaluation is something we do right off the bat. We collect all the data on the practice from you. We've got an online survey. We collect your financials. And we use that to create a valuation. And we take photos and video of the practice. We do an equipment inventory for you. We'll go into the office and print all the reports up. So we collect all the data, and everything that we can do, we do it for you, so you don't have to do it. We like the idea of being full service, and it still will require some effort on your part. Some things that we need to ask you, but we'll talk directly with your accountant. We'll talk directly with your attorney. We'll do everything we can to take the load off of you. And we prepare the marketing. And once you've given us the green light, then we take it to market, and we market through our various channels. And there are many. And we've got great SEO. We've got a great website. And I would mention on that front too, on the website, there are great tools for buyers and sellers. Maybe we can talk about that whenever you're ready. But we have reach across the country. Actually, we have a list of on our email blast list. We have dentists all over the country that are looking to buy in California, and we're now in Arizona and Nevada as well.
Yeah, and really, intelligence and presence matters when it comes to practice sales, right? I always like to kind of think about it as buying and selling a home, right? That's a little bit easier because we have this thing called the multiple listing service. You can jump online, you can see all the homes, you know approximately what they're worth, and you can call up any real estate agent and pretty much get the deal done, right? It's because the information is out there. Dental industry and dental practices, it's not quite like that, is it?
Not quite. No, not. And perhaps it will be at some future date, but presently it's not. It's a very different market, the dental practice sales marketplace, and I think it's because it got started kind of late when somebody figured out that there's actually an asset there, and so there. It was just one broker started and selling practices, as a business entity, and it grew from there. But it's still most brokers in the dental space are double ending deals. They represent the seller only. And so the buyer needs, an attorney and an accountant and sometimes a consultant as well.
Wait, double ending deals. Wait, what are you talking about there?
So there's generally, like you mentioned, residential real estate. You usually have an agent representing both buyer and seller, and in the dental marketplace, that's not the case. There's an agent / broker who's representing the seller only. And so the buyer usually has as representation his or her attorney, accountant, and consultant. Those are kind of the three key players that the buyer is bringing to the table.
So they may not have a broker helping them acquire the practice. They're really not getting representation on that side at all then.
No, but we it's just kind of the way that the industry has evolved, and if comparing this, and obviously it can I can see where it could be perilous for the buyer, but it actually becomes a redundancy. We've come to view it that way, and we've always, since the beginning, we've always been happy to cooperate. If somebody another broker brings us a buyer, we're always happy to do that, to cooperate, because what we want to do is, once we get a listing, we want to sell that listing as fast as possible, right? But it's just, it hasn't evolved that way yet, and perhaps at some point it will. So that's kind of the world we live in. Once we get into the transaction, actually having two brokers or two agents involved is a bit of redundancy, and it can clog the process up a bit, because the people that really know, that really understand the practice, are the consultants. And a smart buyer will bring a consultant and also have an accountant look at it, and then an attorney. Those are the three advisors that a buyer should be bringing to the table. And there's cost, right, with each of those, but it's well worth it, because they can go in with eyes wide open.
Yeah, no, that's great. So if we want to contact you, if someone listening says, hey, I really do, I want to get that valuation, I want to get a consultation, how do they do that?
Our website, integritypracticesales.com, is probably the quickest reference I can give you. And our phone number is 855-DDS-4DDS, the number 4, 855-337-4337. That's
a pretty easy way to find you there, isn't it?
Yep.
And I'll go ahead and put that link in the chat for everyone. And so, yeah, I would encourage you to do this, no matter where you are on the spectrum. If you're a couple years out of school, or a couple years from retirement, or somewhere right in the middle, it makes sense to have these conversations consistently and regularly, because it is a major asset for you, for your family, for the people you care about, and you want to make sure you're taking care of it. So reach out, get a valuation, right? Get a consultation, figure out, are you on track? And a little bit of that preparation goes a long way, doesn't it, Darren?
It sure does. Yeah. And you mentioned the valuation, and for anybody who contacts us, feel free and mention this program, mention Tim McNeely. We'll provide a free basic valuation for you on your practice.
You can't beat that. That's a great deal right there. And so before we sign off, Darren, any closing thoughts or any kind of last words to the doctors that are listening to us today?
Yeah, just a reminder, plan and prepare today, and you'll have a lot of peace, for the rest of your career and into retirement.
Wow. Well, hey, thank you for sharing so generously. I know I certainly have a better idea of the planning process, things I should look out for, and really what goes into preparing your practice for a profitable transition. So thank you so much, Darren. I appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much, Tim.
All right. And to all you listeners, we're looking forward to having you here again here on Dental Wealth Nation.
You've been listening to Dental Wealth Nation. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Join us next time as we pull back the curtain to reveal the often hidden advice and strategies used by today's most successful individuals and families, and help maximize your net worth so you can take even better care of the people you love. Till next time, make sure to hit the website at dentalwealthnation.com.